Hello, my name is Leeanne Quinn and I'm here to introduce my new collection of poetry, Landscape with Question, which is published by Carcanet Press on June 25th, 2026. It's always difficult to say what a book is about, but in many ways when I think about this collection, I think it is a book about perception and perspective, especially as it relates to spatial and temporal landscapes. The book has two touchstone figures. One is the Irish modernist artist Nana Reid, who was born in my hometown of Drogheda, a medieval town on the east coast of Ireland. Reid was one of the leading modernist artists of her generation, and I've always been hugely drawn to her paintings. The other figure is the Austrian-born poet and writer Ingeborg Bachmann, and especially her novel Malina. I've been interested in Bachmann and her work for some time. I spent several years living in Germany and Austria, and I very recently returned to live in Ireland. So many of the poems in the collection were written in Vienna. The book is a sort of composite of landscapes and geographies. As I was writing, the landscapes of Drogheda, which Reid painted, and the landscapes of Vienna, which feature in Bachmann's writing, began to sit alongside one another. The collection, however, is not written in the voice of either of these two figures, but the speaker is, to varying degrees, moving in terrains that are psychologically imbued with the work of these two artists. The speaker is also a type of composite figure. In a way, though, they do have very specific traits and qualities within the book. The speaker is a figure who very much doubts and distrusts. They're always questioning what they see in an attempt to better understand the temporal, the way time moves or appears to move. I started to think about the speaker as a sort of quest figure who is weaving their way through a series of spatial and temporal geographies in which they're trying to understand place and time and the effects of place and time upon their person, upon themselves. I'm going to read two poems from the collection, which I hope will give you some sense of the book. And the first is from the opening section, and it's called Landscape with Daffodils. Since I survived the winter, since I was so happy and it was already March, the first warm day of the year, the ice rink had finally closed, and in the park the magnolias had begun to bloom. I wanted to find the broad arrows, to know the highest point. I was born 140 feet above sea. Where was I now? Where was the bed of daffodils that turned into yellow-topped bins? I still remember their apparent colour. Where were they now? You could see a lot from the hill, and it was quite beautiful. In winter, I had to try harder. Think of the leaf, of the Stadtpark, of the daffodils real in the distance, of the cars slowing down at the gates of the park, of your hand on the broad arrow. It must have been there all along, but how much of my life am I supposed to remember? I'll read the title poem of the collection, Landscape with Question. When the question comes again, I see only hollow landscapes lapsing into sun, as if time were space and not just the absence of a plausible answer, a sense equation that anyone could recognise as a sensible way of structuring thought. And it was always there, sure to be one of one. But how best to signal miscomprehension? I shrug my shoulders or move my hands in some sort of gesturing gesture. But in the end, I must admit, it is not of my grasping. The sequence is sun into moonlight, an object closing in on itself, a city where I once walked, or the river rising and falling. At the crowded intersection, titled People in the City, I was part of the arrangement, one foot before the other, one thought into another, but no one lapsing into an image of rotting fruit. It must never be like that. To the question that is not even fair to the asker, I make no fair reply. Thank you very much for listening.